Welcome to Our Stories Matter Courage on Campus. This season, we address the alarming surge of antisemitism and radicalization on college campuses. With a 477% increase in incidents affecting Jewish students, we explore the mental health impact of polarization, challenge harmful narratives, and seek pathways to resilience.
We'll also hear from those who've left radicalized group, gaining insight into extremism and a journey toward dismantling hate. Join us as we amplify stories of growth, foster understanding, and drive change.
On today's episode, we will be talking with Eden Yadegar, a senior at Columbia University who has emerged as a prominent advocate against anti-Semitism on college campuses. Eden is the president of Columbia's chapter of Students Supporting Israel, which is so brave, and she has organized pro-Israel rallies and educational events to raise awareness about Jewish identity and counteract rising hostility. Not to mention that in November 2024, she testified before the U.S. House Committee on Education and the Workforce about her experience.
Susie, Eden is a force. So today we're going to talk to her about her activism, what was helpful and not helpful with the dialogues on campuses, and she's also going to share about her personal experience as a Jewish student on campus.
Eden, it is so great to have you with us today. You have been at the forefront of advocating for Jewish students. So, given your experience, what do you see as the greatest challenge Jewish students face on campus today?
It's a big question for sure. Speaking broadly, I think the greatest challenge that Jewish students face, and really, Americans that care about the future of our nation, that care about standing up for minorities, that care about standing up for true free speech, is an increase in radicalization on college campuses. And I know that that's a larger theme that you guys are speaking about and researching. But it's really true, and we feel the effects firsthand practically every single day, whether it's in the classroom with professors who praise the October 7th massacre, which has unfortunately become not just a one-off at Columbia and at universities across the country, or our classmates and former friends that suddenly turned on us Jewish students because of our support for Israel and completely abandoned us because they couldn't hold being friends with Zionists in tandem with being part of this social movement that really is built on radicalism and a warped worldview that doesn't actually hold so many facts as it does ideology. It isn't just the sort of overarching threat of radicalism, but we really do feel the effects every single day. And it's really alarming that we have, faculty members that are contributing to it, our classmates are contributing to it and being, I don't know if it's the victims of radicalization is the right word, but I guess so. And unfortunately, administrators and leaders on campus that don't have the moral courage nor clarity to stand up to it.
Wow. So it's really, from what you're describing, it's everywhere. There's the anti-Semitism effect that you and your friends are experiencing, and also what's happening for the rest of the students. And I wonder, can you share some of your personal stories, some personal experiences as a Jewish student that facing anti-Semitism on campus? What is that like? What's going on over there?
Oh, how much time do you have? It's really unfortunate because I was so mesmerized by Columbia until October 7th. It felt like the biggest blessing in the world that I got to study at a university surrounded by some of the brightest minds that I had ever encountered. I looked forward to going to class every day. I looked forward to being around campus. And after October 7th, things just sort of flipped on their head. I went from being very much in non-Jewish social circles to being blacklisted in many of those social circles, completely isolated, dropped, cut off by people I considered to be really close friends just because I supported the existence of the state of Israel. And as the year progressed and tensions escalated on campus, I began to lose more and more friends, and I became a target of this really vitriolic rhetoric of the Free Palestine movement on campus, the very same people that claim to be against doxing and harassment, that were posting photos of me, slandering me, making up stories about me. It even got to the point where they brought my family into it, and SJP and the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Coalition were posting photos of my mother on their social media, because of my activism. But it didn't start there. It started with social isolation because of my Zionism, not even because of my activism, because this was as early on as like October 10th. And I share this story because this is the story of, unfortunately, way too many Jewish and Israeli students on campus, friends of mine that have been kicked out of the dance club, the gardening club, the list goes on, simply for being Jews who support Israel. And these are people that haven't even spoken out in ways that some of us have. You know, they're not testifying before Congress, they're not suing the university. They're just Jewish students that want to live their lives. I mean, much like I was, but it's really, unfortunately, ubiquitous. So whether or not you're an advocate or an activist, if you're a Jew who supports Israel at Columbia University, it's reason enough to be completely socially isolated here.
You know, what you're describing is something that Susan and I talk about quite often, which is traumatic invalidation of the Jewish community after October 7th. And one of the things that we've seen, and this is the area that I research quite often, is that Jews, and especially students, we just finished a review of what's happening on a different university around the US, meet all the criteria for traumatic invalidation. So the emotional neglect, the ignoring, the criticizing, the blaming, the excluding, like everything that you just mentioned. And I think what people don't understand, that the mental aspect of traumatic invalidation can really lead all the way to pervasive insecurity, to PTSD symptoms, to feeling invalidated, to self-invalidation. I mean, the mental health aspect of it is as much a direct, indirect exposure to anti-Semitism. So like what you were saying, it and like how you were affected because you are holding the torch, right? You're an activist and you're an advocate, but it sounds like your peers are also affected just by being Jews.
Absolutely. It's funny almost. I was I was speaking to a cousin of mine who spent like basically the entirety of the first year of the war serving in Gaza, and the first thing he said to me was, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? I can't believe what's happening on campus. Like, I'm so worried about you. Are you safe?" And I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness, my cousin who has been dodging missiles and bullets every single day for the last year is worried about me on an American college campus where I'm supposed to be protected by our administrators, by our leaders, who have unfortunately been nowhere to be found. But if you try to zoom out for a second, it is really, really ridiculous that on our Ivy League campuses that purport to champion liberalism, acceptance, and tolerance of all people, a minority community has just been entirely marginalized, discriminated against, and then gaslit to no end. I mean, it is just still sometimes unbelievable to me a year and a half later that we're still at this point.
Unbelievable. Everything you've said have given me the chills because I've been watching what's been happening on Columbia. So being at USC, when people say, "Oh, how is it at USC?" I'm like, "Oh, it's not Columbia." Like that's my response.
Gosh.
And I know. And then when you were talking about your cousin, when I met Mary just, last March when we were in Israel, and to this day I feel safer in Israel than I do, in Los Angeles, or definitely on a college campus for sure. Even when UCLA has like, events, I'm physically not wanting to go. But another thing you were talking about is Zionism and anti-Zionism. And we just interviewed Arno Mubin yesterday, former extremist. And Arno was saying, as a former neo-Nazi, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and it started within white supremacy. So the fact that these quote unquote progressives are using that as a fight, that's part of a white supremacist lens.
It is chilling to hear you speak about this because literally just yesterday, one of these groups leading the Free Palestine movement on campus posted this infographic. And one of the slides, I almost want to find it and read it. One of the slides literally said, like, white supremacist Jew, so and so. They were attacking an Israeli professor. I was literally like, white supremacist Jew, talk about an oxymoron. And I think more than anything, it just goes to show you how deeply ignorant and brainwashed the people leading and participating in this, well, maybe not leading, but certainly participating in this movement are. I think it's led by a much more sinister, calculated force. But at the very least, on college campuses, the vast majority of students that are following this movement like sheep and creating these like trendy looking infographics that are calling Jews and Israelis white supremacists know absolutely nothing about the region, about the history, about Jewish identity. And so to hear you say that a former white supremacist said that anti-Zionism is rooted in anti-Semitism, that they're actually interchangeable is it's sort of upsetting, but really validating to hear as someone who has been surrounded by people trying to gaslight me to believe that like Zionist identity is totally separate from Jewish identity and actually is a form of white supremacy. And again, like these are all just buzzwords that uneducated classmates of mine like to throw around. But, something I keep coming back to is the question of like, when does ignorance stop being an excuse? Because when a Jewish person like me is telling you that when you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I don't hear it as a call for liberation of all oppressed people, which is like a phrase that they like to throw around. I hear it as a call for the genocide of everyone living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. That's one example. But as a Jewish person, if I'm explaining to you what you're saying means and the actual impact of your words on me, and you still can't hold empathy and can't use another phrase to get your message across, then that isn't just ignorance anymore. At that point, that's anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean we're with you 100%. I was just telling Susie the other day. I was interviewed for a podcast, and I was talking about again the traumatic invalidation piece and how one of them is exactly what you just said it, and the idea of someone else defining to you what is hurtful. It's like that controlling the narrative, which no one will do to any other minority group. I mean, can you imagine telling like an African American what is racism, or telling someone from the LGBTQ community what's considered offensive? No one will ever do that. But for us, it's kind of like okay to identify, to define what is anti-Semitism. And already on the comments to the podcast, someone wrote that I'm using it as a way of justifying what Israel is doing. It's making anti-Semitism as an excuse for the government of Israel. It's like, no, it is a trigger for trauma. Specifically, people like you that take this sentence and are being triggered because this is exactly what Hamas terrorists said on October 7th when they massacred people. Then yes, from the river to the sea is not going to be this no context kind of sentence. It's going to hold a lot of emotional weight for it. So, I'm wondering, taking that into account, like I know that this is what people are saying on college campuses. How do you feel the universities are handling this and specifically compared to other forms of hate that are happening on campuses?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll speak for Columbia because I think there are some universities that have actually been doing a relatively great job in handling this crisis that we've seen erupt in the country over the last year and a half. But at Columbia in particular, I really do think that the anti-Semitism is so deeply ingrained in the culture that administrators and leaders on campus, much like students and many faculty members, don't even think twice about it because it's just become something that is so normalized here. And I'll give an example. I'm sure that you saw over the summer several deans at Columbia that were actually really student life oriented positions. Those deans, one was like the dean of Columbia College, and two were deans in the student life department, were caught texting about how Jewish students are embellishing the experiences of anti-Semitism, that we're huddling together in the craft center, which is our Hillel building, and that we are, poor us. It is preposterous to me that the people that are tasked with literally ensuring our well-being, which is one of those roles of those deans, was I should find the exact title, but it was something like for student success. But the point of the story is just to say that anti-Semitism is so normalized at Columbia that if you've been paying attention or look at sort of Columbia's recent history, it should actually come as no surprise that we found ourselves in the situation we're in now, because we have faculty members that are promoting this narrative that Israel is a settler colonial state. We have no alternative narrative. So in the Middle East Studies department where I'm majoring, there are no professors teaching a pro-Israel or even like an objective historical narrative. It's one thing to have faculty members that teach a perspective that I may not agree with, or that other Jews and Israelis may not agree with. But at the same time, it's critical to offer a counter narrative. It's critical to have faculty members that are teaching a narrative that is not just apartheid and settler colonialism and genocide, because in the Middle East Studies department, and again, I speak to that because I'm a Middle East Studies major, that is all that there is on Israel. Last semester, I wanted to take a course on Israel, and the only one offered was taught by Professor Joseph Massad, who praised the October 7th massacre and who says that Jews have zero connection to Israel, and that a fundamental aspect of Israeli political culture is being inherently genocidal. And there is no counter narrative. Anyway, I'm digressing, but the point of this to say is that it's this ideology is promoted by the faculty and it is hardly countered, and then our administrators are unwilling to take a moral stance against it. So in the name of free speech, if you want to have a faculty member that's teaching things that I might find really vile, maybe it's your prerogative to do that. Personally, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think a private university is entitled to platform bigots, nor should they. But if you really want to get into the legal argument, which obviously is not my expertise, I'm just an undergraduate, but it's critical to then offer counter narratives and offer another perspective, or at the very least, say that you condemn it, that you don't agree with it. And there has been very little moral clarity and moral leadership coming from our administration. And it's disappointing. Like, I was really disappointed. I thought the world of Colombia as a doe-eyed 18-year-old coming here. And now I realize that the unfortunate reality is that most of the leaders here just could not care less about the well-being of their Jewish students.
It's so heartbreaking, and everything you said is chilling, because I am chilled to the bone when my colleagues at USC say things or went silent. They either went silent or they were saying like from the river to the sea statements. And it was so hard for me to concentrate and to focus. And, I had to recreate my entire support system, and friends similar to you. And so thinking about myself, and I'm not living with my colleagues. So I'm wondering, how has this impacted you and Jewish students in terms of the radicalism and all the hate, whether it's from students, faculty, or the admin?
The unfortunate reality is that there are countless anecdotes I could tell you that are, one, really devastating and really heartbreaking, but two, really should be considered a warning sign for anyone that cares or is invested in the future of higher education in America. The radicalism that has been allowed to take root on our campus because of radical faculty members and cowardly administrators is not just a threat to Jewish and Israeli students. We have faced the brunt of the harassment, discrimination, the targeting, but at the end of the day, it's a stain on higher education, and it's a stain on America and America's values. And it's been really heartening to see so many moral, patriotic Americans look at what's happening on campuses like mine and say, this is not who we are. We need to be better. And I don't say that as a political statement whatsoever, because this is the last thing that this is and should be treated as a political issue or a partisan issue. But I mean, like, average everyday Americans who watch the news and say, why are Jewish students being prohibited from entering certain parts of their campus? Why has a pro-terror mob, an anti-American mob, been able to shut down campus and make it so that final exams and the last 2 weeks of the semester are either canceled or moved to Zoom, which are things that all happened at Columbia last year? that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of grounding, because the unfortunate reality is that at Columbia, at least, it feels like a lot of academics, specifically in the humanities and in Middle East studies, which is again my field, prioritize ideology over facts and over morality. And, we don't need to get into like the whole philosophical question of like what morality looks like in this situation, but the point of that is just to say that it has to be taken as a warning sign for the state of higher education in our country. And I think that right now is a pivotal moment. And if we don't have leaders that step up and make the potentially difficult but necessary fundamental reforms to protect our students and save the essence of our university, save the soul of our universities, I don't know if we're going to be able to come back from this. And that's really scary, because I think that our universities and places of higher education are pillars of our country and part of what make America the greatest country on earth, in my opinion.
No, and I'm thinking of some of the stuff that you were saying even before about how some of the professors, especially in the Middle Eastern, teach those classes and working. So my field, when I work with radicalized individuals, one of the things that we know is that the brain in general is not fully developed until like late 20s, right? So I'm thinking of like all the undergrad just coming out of high school, where, for teenagers, for example, we know that the thinking of black and white kind of way actually puts them vulnerable to being radicalized. So then when you go to college and you're still kind of like a teenager, not fully adult, like you're getting there, to have professors, someone in power that is also pushing that very one-sided narrative, it makes everybody more vulnerable to extremism because it doesn't help you think in a critical way. It doesn't have those nuances of two sides to look at things from different perspective, which, for me, when I go to college, I thought that's what we're supposed to learn, is to think about stuff from different perspective and criticize everything. So I'm just thinking out loud here about how everyone are so vulnerable to this.
I think that that's the key, because, and this is me just speaking from personal experiences in the Middle East Studies department, at least, I feel like I'm being taught what to think, not how to think. And that is terrifying. And it's also, like you said, not really why I came to a university, and certainly not why I came to a university like Columbia. I knew that getting into the Middle East Studies department, I was going to be challenged and made uncomfortable. And that was what excited me. The point of higher education is not to be comfortable, but there's a difference between being told every day that you deserve to die because of your identity, of being barred from going to classes, and intellectual discomfort in the classroom. Those are two different things, certainly not to be conflated. But to go back to your point, I mean, I think it's really scary that, again, at least in a lot of humanities departments, students are being taught to view the world in binaries. There's a class in the Middle East Studies department at Columbia called Theory and Culture, and it's one of the required classes, and it's sort of intended to give students a framework of how to go about navigating the major, how to absorb information, what frameworks through which to view the world. And the biggest takeaway for me from that class was that there is an oppressor and there are the oppressed. And there is no nuance, there is no overlap. There is good and there is bad. And that is how you should view the world. After taking that class, I sort of realized how some of my classmates were able to look at what happened on October 7th, and instead of saying, "This is appalling, I would never support this," say, we have to look at it in the context of history. We can't look at it in a vacuum. This is just resistance to occupation, because they are taught to view the world again through this framework of oppressor and oppressed, and the oppressors will always be committing the evil, and the oppressed can do no wrong because they are marginalized. And it is terrifying to see that indoctrination happen in real time, happen to my friends, happen to people that I considered very close to me, when, you're taught to view or to prize ideology over humanity and over facts. It's chilling. And it not that it like rationalizes, me losing friends, but it certainly helped me understand why I did. Because when you do prize ideology over humanity, over morals, and over facts, it's easy to just completely strip the humanity away from someone that you considered a friend if you view them as supporting something that you just deem to be purely evil, which is in their minds the state of Israel and everything that the state of Israel does.
And yet I can imagine that losing friends is extremely painful. So, the psychologist in me want to push you and be like, share more. Like, how, let's get personal, let's get vulnerable and uncomfortable. What has been going on for you and your friends in like the Jewish community or other people that you've seen? How did everything that happened on campus affected your mental health, your ability to join activities, to basically enjoy being a student?
I think that my Jewish identity has always been critical to who I am. It's always been a fundamental aspect of my identity, and I've never been shy about it. Before October 7th, I viewed myself as a Columbia student who was also Jewish. And after October 7th, it's shifted to completely to a Jewish Columbia student. And it's like a small shift, but rather than just being a student like everyone else who also is Jewish, I felt like my peers viewed me as a Jew first and foremost. I've always been involved in Jewish life on campus. It's been very important to me. One of my majors is Jewish studies. And at the same time, I came to college wanting to be surrounded by people who grew up with different traditions and from different backgrounds and different experiences, because again, that was the whole point of going to college for me. So I always had one foot in the Jewish community, but it was also important to me to have one foot out of the Jewish community. And it really felt like after October 7th, that door kind of slammed in my face because of my Zionism. And the more I began to speak out for Israel, the more that became sort of cemented. I will say, though, that like there have been certainly a number of non-Jewish friends and classmates that have become friends since, that have been able to view the situation with so much clarity and say that, this is wrong. For those people, like, I will never be able to express sufficient gratitude, because at moments where it felt like where everyone around me hated me for simply who I was, there were still people that could look at the situation again and say, no, this is wrong, and this is not, something that I support. And then getting to the topic of within the Jewish community, I have just been completely blown away by the strength and resilience and warmth of the Jewish community at Columbia. I guess actually I can say with certainty that I know I would not be at this university if it weren't for the immensely supportive Jewish community here. These are people that have been there for me 24/7. And these are people, some of them who were very close friends of mine prior to October 7th and the chaos that ensued on campus, but many of them were friends that I found after October 7th. And I think that they'll be able to tell you the same thing, which is that they also lost, unfortunately, many friends and were isolated from certain communities they were involved in on campus. But a friend of mine, one of these friends who has become like a sister to me in the last year and a half, put it so eloquently. And she said that for every friend that she's lost due to hatred and anti-Semitism, she has made a dozen in proud Zionist Jewish friends who are unwavering in their support and in their friendship. And that has just been the most powerful, heartwarming, reinforcing silver lining of the last year and a half. Knowing that like we have this support system, that we have spaces like Columbia, Hillel, and Chabad, which are both unbelievably incredible spaces and teams that like when I say that they make the sun rise every single day for the Jewish community, I really mean it. I don't know where we would be. I don't know where I would be without Columbia, Hillel, and Chabad. They are truly heroes, and the communities that they cultivate have been a saving grace for me and so many of my Jewish classmates.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. And I'm so relieved that you have like safe spaces basically at Chabad and Hillel. And, Miri and I probably either been maybe more me before October 7th. I was not loud and proud. I would say casually, I'm a second generation Russian Jew, and that was it. Then I became like October 8th when, the world slash my friends went silent, the majority, and making anti Semitic rhetoric, like saying it to me. Then I became loud and proud. I'm like, oh no, no, no. And then Miri and I, we met and fight, freeze, or flee. At first, I went into freeze and I just was shocked that this was happening. When I went to college, my family said, you have to go to a college where there's at least 30% Jews. And I thought that was such a World War II thought process. I mean, I said, fine. And then they're like, you have to have a Jewish roommate, which I thought was like sort of weird too, because I really wanted to meet other people. Now they were right. They were doing that based on what they experienced and their parents' experience, and it never died. It was just hidden. And so, my next question for you, because I think you're similar in terms of your activism, Miri and I now we're like fighting. So, I went from freeze to like major fight, and like we both sort of can't do enough. How has activism, because you've been doing a lot of activism, how has that maybe helped create like a safer, more inclusive, or just helped you find like purpose in all of this?
I mean, that's it's great to hear that you had a similar experience to me because it feels so silly to be like, oh, I wanted to really make sure I was branching out of the Jewish community, but it's certainly something that it sounds like we both really took for granted until we were reminded of why our community is just so beyond special. But I mean, yeah, to that point, I feel like some of the people that I now consider family are friends that I made through activism and through being forced into this fight on campus. And I say forced because, there are certainly some Jewish and Israeli students that have taken on larger, more public leadership roles in campus activism. But the unfortunate reality is that, like, in many ways, most of us were turned into advocates because of a situation in which we just could not keep silent. I mean, things were so dire. Our identities, our people, our loved ones were under attack, and there was no one else that was going to stand up. So if we didn't do it, who would? And I think that is in itself a very Jewish value and framework. But I have very much a love-hate relationship with the campus activism because, for starters, like, I hate even using the word activist. It feels sort of superficial, and like it feels like it demeans a lot of the work that people are doing to support a cause and a people. And it also doesn't feel like a job. It feels more of like an obligation, but also at the same time, it's totally become an identity because of how personal this is and how all consuming it is, especially back in fall of 2023 and even spring of 2023 or 24, I guess. That whole academic year following October 7th, I think I was missing just as much class as I was attending, if not more. And Mom, if you're listening to this, I'm very, very sorry. But it was it was at a point where, like, if we weren't organizing at that time, it was a lot of vigils, rallies, protests, community gatherings, even educational events on and around campus. Those events just simply weren't happening. And it was, gosh, just such a whirlwind at the time. And a lot of this is actually detailed in the lawsuit against Columbia, which I'm a plaintiff in. It's a Title VI suit with Kasowitz. And back in the fall of 2023, when I was the president of our chapter of Students Supporting Israel, there were countless events that we would try to put on campus, and we were told that they couldn't happen by university leadership because of either security concerns or because there wasn't sufficient time for planning. And we were like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, SJP and JVP and this coalition, CUAD, is doing whatever they want on campus, whenever they want, with zero consequence. And more than a year later, like, we've still seen very little accountability. But then, we wanted to do something like a private Krav Maga class, and we were told that that couldn't happen on campus. Or we wanted to have a silent demonstration, where we literally held roses and balloons to honor the lives lost and honor the hostages, and we were told I was told that if I went through with that event, that it would be possible that I would face disciplinary action
Wow.
personally and as a leader of SSI. So it was incredibly frustrating to feel like we were just a group of students trying to navigate the aftermath of this massacre on campus when we were still mourning loved ones, not knowing back in October even like how many people had been killed, how many had been taken hostage. I mean, it was a nightmare. And again, like it feels so silly to put so much weight on our experience here in America when, you know, our friends and loved ones are sacrificing their lives to defend the very existence of our nation. But it was wow, a crazy time. I think I like kind of blacked out some of it. Like I'm honestly not wanting to remember all of the details because of just how overwhelming it was. But as the year progressed and as we came to understand the scope of the situation, that, you know, the movement against us on campus wasn't just a grassroots student-led movement, it's been really helpful to have just incredible Jewish faculty members, lay leaders, fellow Jewish classmates of mine that have just been unbelievably supportive and inspiring in leading this fight for the Jewish future and for Israel on Columbia's campus.
You know what I'm taking from what you're saying, you're kind of like an accidental activist. And Susan and I often talk about this concept of post-traumatic growth, of giving meaning to difficult events as a way of healing. And that sense of doing for a lot of people, definitely for me, is what keeps me going and fighting the fight or doing for other people. Again, back to Jewish, Jewish culture and mitzvah and all of that. There is this word in Hebrew, Natan, that you spell backward and forward the same way, because I feel like when you give to others, you're actually getting something back. And I think that's what activism is for me. And then there was other thing that you said about that fight and and doing all of those stuff that, it reminds me, someone asked me why am I doing what I'm doing? And it's because for me, I'm doing it because my grandparents who are a Holocaust survivor could not, and because I don't want my kids to go through that. So the fact that you're fighting it now because you don't have a choice definitely resonate with me. A long way to ask you this question. Um, if you had a magic wand and you can have the people in university do one thing differently, of supporting you differently or fighting radicalization and hate differently, what do you want them to do? How would they do it differently?
Ooh, that's a good question. First of all, I just have to quickly say that like it makes me so emotional to hear you say that because I think that that is something that Jews everywhere relate to, that, you know, we are speaking up and we are doing what we're doing because of the generations of Jews that have come before us that couldn't. And in that sense, it's like it really is such a privilege to be able to speak up and be proud and wear our Magen Davids and say that, like, you can shout me down all you want, and it's not going to make me shut up, and it's not going to make me less proud of being Jewish. And it's just such a grounding reminder of why we're in this fight and why it's so important to stay in this fight when things get overwhelming and difficult and frustrating and sometimes even very terrifying. So I just really appreciate you saying that because I think it's something that we can all really relate to. But to answer your question, I think that so much of this chaos and vitriol and animosity and hurt that has happened, that all students really have sort of become victims of, even those that are the ones propagating it. You know, I try to hold like empathy and humanity for the people that have made the lives of Jewish students hell on campus as well, because I do think that a lot of them haven't still realized the impacts of their actions on themselves. Like, I think so much of this could have been avoided if we had strong leadership on day one that said, this is wrong. As a private university, we have our own code of conduct and set of standards. We should have never gotten to the point where students were able to repeatedly violently break into buildings on campus, assault Columbia staff members, even sending one to the hospital, make it so that Jewish students weren't able to enter parts of campus, and ultimately get classes canceled for the entire student body, there's no reason we should have gotten to that point. And I think that a lot of it could have been curbed or avoided entirely if we had leadership that said at the very beginning that this behavior will not be tolerated. Targeting and harassing your classmates or your students will not be tolerated. And if you violate our code of conduct, if you violate our restrictions and policies on demonstrations, you will be held accountable. I, for the life of me, still don't understand why that was so hard to do from the beginning. No one is asking for restrictions on protected speech. I think that my classmates should frankly be able to say things that I find offensive, but not when they're directed at me or my classmates. Not when they are resulting in conduct and actions that make us unsafe, that result in the assault of my classmates and my friends. It's a fine line, but it could have been made very clear in October of 2023, and so much hurt could have been avoided, and so much money could have been saved.
Yes.
So for
yes,
that,
yes, and yes.
for that reason, I have no problem putting blame on the lack of leadership that we've seen at Columbia. I understand it's a tough position, but leading is not ever supposed to be easy, right?
Exactly.
Amen to that. Wow.
So we ask everyone 2 final questions. So one is, what will you do for your healing this week?
It's a great question. I love that. Candidly, it's something I'm working on, and I think that many of us need to work on. This might date the episode. I was going to say I'm celebrating Purim with my friends, but should I say something
Oh,
else?
that's okay. No, I love
Okay.
that.
What are you going to be for Purim?
I'm open to suggestions. I don't have a costume yet, but I know that I will be at Chabad with my friends celebrating. The Purim story is like always feels so relevant, especially as a Persian Jewish woman. I've always loved Purim very much, so I'm very excited.
Then be the queen. Avi.
Yes. Yes, you
Maybe-
are.
Honestly, maybe I will do it.
Yes.
I need my king.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, listeners, Eden is looking for a king, just saying. Okay, and one final question. What was it like to share your story with us today?
Therapeutic. Oh my gosh, I was not expecting to feel like I sort of just let a weight off. So thank you for letting me sort of vent. That was very healing, especially coming straight from a protest on campus where abominable things were chanted and directed at Jews and Israelis per usual. But it never gets old. So I feel really loved, and I feel really grateful that you guys are letting me share my story and that you're listening and amplifying it. It really means a lot.
Well, thank you for your voice and for your courage.
100%. I love your heartbeat, and you are the most eloquent, not even student, just human being. I mean, everything you were saying, it was like, that is what I'm feeling. So it was a mutual experience of your words and your language. It's just so, yeah, it was healing for me. So I so appreciate you.
Wow, that's incredibly kind and really means a lot coming from you. You both are heroes, and I feel very grateful and very thankful that the Jewish community has people like you that are representing us.
We'd like to thank our listeners, Israeli music composer Jonathan Bar-Giora, editor Ian Phillips, podcast advisor Donna Fazari, and special thanks to the Academic Engagement Network for their generous support. Today's episode is co-produced by Associate Professor Susie Hess and Dr. Miri Bar-Halprin.
Our Stories Matter, Courage on Campus is brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and our website at traumainformedla.org. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more folks can have access and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep recording and healing through our storytelling episodes.